In optical fabrication, we started lean. When we did our first value stream map, we mapped an optical component that traveled 6.5 miles in a building.
Oh.
Yeah, right? We had spherical optics that were traveling 2.5 miles in a building. And all of a sudden you start to say,
there's got to be a better way. A quick interruption to remind you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better. Hey, it's Ari Santiago, President, CEO of IT Direct, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Made in America podcast. I'm with John Leposky from Asml, and I'm really excited to have him on today. First manufacturer we've had on that actually makes the stuff that we work with all the time at IT Direct. John, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your views.
Hi, Ari. I'm glad to be here.
Well, listen, it's the Made in America podcast, so we start off with the same two questions. What do you make, and why do you make it?
Well, what ASML makes is large machines that actually make small chips. Why do we do it? We do it to really drive innovation and technology that actually improves the way we live, the way we work, the way we play.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, let's just dig into this really quickly. We're going to get into your background, but I just do want to talk about large machines that make small chips. So we're not talking about paint chips. We're talking about computer chips. So let's talk a little bit about what it is that you make the machines that make the things that power the machines we all use every single day.
So basically the machine that ASML produces is, in simplified terms, is a big camera system, right? But it's a high precision camera system. It consists of optics. It consists of precision mechanics. It's all about precision because when you're actually producing microprocessor chips, right, and when you're actually, today, we're doing 5 nanometer lines, our customers are, the precision that you have to have in every module, every optical component, everything that comes together with the software and the hardware in that machine is what makes that machine today. But what really not only makes the machine, but it's all the people of ASML. ASML is over 25,000 people worldwide. It is the combination of all the people inside of ASML that makes this technology happen.
Yeah, and so of the products that get made on the machines that you guys make, if I'm someone listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, what's something that they have in their house or that they use that gets made on the machines you guys make?
So people that have iPads, iPhones, Samsung phones, any of the technology that everybody has in their hands today, pretty sure that the chips have come off of ASML machines.
Listen, I wanted to get that out there because I just think it's so cool that, you know, this stuff that we use every single day that we think of as Silicon Valley or South Korea or whatever, that a core part of that is made by machines that are designed and produced right here in Connecticut, which is
correct.
pretty cool. So before we get more into the what, I'd like to dig into the why a little bit, and let's sort of talk about your personal why, John. How did you get to be the senior manager of optical products in Wilton, Connecticut here?
I have a pretty interesting career. My beginning of my career, I started off in engineering. As a young engineer, I was really just hungry for knowledge, worked for a lot of different companies, got a lot of different exposure. Was presented with a lot of different situations. One company I worked for went from a non-union shop to a union shop. I worked for smaller companies that I've actually relocated out of the state. So when you look at it, basically going from kind of the engineering side and then really, you know, whatever you design, you've got to be able to manufacture it. You have to be able to manufacture it. So as an engineer, developing processes, developing tooling to support processes, developing all that needed to make sure that your yields are, you know, 90 or 100% and not 40%, right? Because at 40%, no company in the world is going to survive.
No.
So that actually then, as my career kind of progressed, I actually worked up at, it's now Danbury Optical Systems. So I worked 3 years up there when it was actually Raytheon or used Danbury Optical Systems because it's changed hands so many times. But I worked 3 years up there on NASA's AXAF program where I actually gained some knowledge and experience of optics. And then upon finishing there, I came down to what is today ASML. But when I started down there, it was actually SVG lithography. So as with anything, ASML basically acquired SVG in 2001, where at that point I had developed an expertise kind of in building precision projection lenses, as well as developing processes, handling a lot of different things. So part of anything in anybody's career is you want to always continue to grow. You always want to stay in that, I call it the learning mode, right?
Sure.
Always learning, always looking for opportunities, looking for challenges. Challenges are tough, right? I mean, some people are like, oh, it's going to be difficult, but it is. But the challenge, when you look at it, really becomes, can I accomplish it? What's it going to take, right? It's going to take you personally. It's going to take you working with people, working in teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you can't solve a problem by yourself. Sometimes you've got to rely on everybody else. And how do you get that team engaged?
Well, listen, if you're not growing and you're not growing your skills, your experiences, you're dying slowly inside.
You are. And it's funny, a colleague that I have worked with basically said, when you stop learning, it's time to go take a different job.
Yeah, no doubt
go
about
learn
that.
something different. Right?
Yeah, keep it moving. What got you to go? Well, let's just start with this. Where'd you go to school for engineering, and what made you passionate about getting into engineering?
Okay, so getting into engineering, actually growing up as a kid, I think anybody that probably gets into engineering, whether it's mechanical, whether it's electrical, chances are they were probably taking things apart as a kid, trying to figure out how they worked. Many a times, I would come home, I'd have the lawnmower ripped apart, or I'd have the car motor ripped apart. And of course, you get the look from your parents, are like, oh boy, here we go. But that's kind of where you learn. And that's really what got me interested in engineering.
As a kid, did you always look at a lawnmower, a car, and just be like, what makes that work? Is that what was going on? Do you remember kind of like what that mind looked like?
Yes. Growing up, it was what makes it work, right? And all you see is an engine on a lawnmower, right? But you don't know what's going on in the mechanics inside of it. And then as soon as you start taking it apart, you're like, wow, there's a crankshaft, there's gears, there's valves, there's springs. And then you're like, well, how do I get the spring to stay in there? So yeah, that from my personal standpoint, that's kind of where it started. So I ended up pursuing engineering at Penn State. So I graduated from Penn State in aerospace engineering, and ended up coming out to Connecticut, where I've worked for several different companies, and currently today where I reside at ASML, where I've been there for 25 years.
Why do you think, this is a totally different direction I've really ever gone, but I'm just curious, we talk a lot about we don't have enough kids going into STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math. Any thoughts on why you got into engineering and why we don't have more kids in engineering now? Is there any linkage? Has anything changed? Anything we need to do differently?
I don't know if there's a linkage, but I think when I look at it, you got to have the science, the technology, the engineering, the math, right? I think some of the challenges, it's difficult, right? It's difficult. I mean, I remember being in school where, fellow students that I was in school with were struggling with differential calculus, right? And, then it's how do you team up to help them understand it, right? So those were some of the things that you get confronted with. It's really, I think when I look at it, engineering's tough. It is not easy. It is not easy by far. But, as an engineer, doesn't matter what discipline, you're a problem solver, right?
Yeah.
You have to take an analytical approach. You have to look at it, right? When you go through all the different engineering classes, even of computer science, you learn the basics and the fundamentals, but ultimately when you come out of school, you come out of school with the ability to really think through problems and solve problems, which then really leads you into, you've got to learn how to work in teams, right? Because sometimes the problems are so insurmountable that, you sit there and like, I don't have an answer for it.
Yeah, or you break them down to those component parts, and it's
right.
not one problem, it's solving hundreds or maybe thousands of problems. Yeah.
Correct. And understanding that interrelation, so even from ASML, as we drive innovation, right, we are constantly challenging one another because we're being challenged by the customers. We need this, right? And then a challenge basically drives us into a collaboration where, you're bouncing ideas off, you're challenging things, you're questioning things, ultimately, which basically drives the team to care about getting to the solution of that end problem.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And on that point, actually, talking about teams, I think people would be interested and maybe surprised to know what the growth trajectory has been for ASML in recent past from an employment perspective. So maybe just educate the audience, like what does the Wilton operation look like and how has it changed over the last few years?
So if you look at the ASML Wilton factory operations, in the last 5 years, we have doubled our size. So we have literally went from 900 people, and we're approaching close to 2,000 this year. In the last 3 years, we've actually added over 900 people, and that's 900 technicians, engineers, logistical support functions, procurement functions. It's a combination of all the different disciplines.
Listen, that's great. I mean, it's always exciting for me to hear about manufacturers growing in Connecticut, and that's very, very strong growth across the board. So, but that must mean now in your role, less about engineering and more about managing people, fair to say?
That's a fair assessment.
So talk me through when you decided you were going to tackle a different challenge, when the hill of the engineering challenge was no longer the hill you were going to climb and you were going to go into the challenge of how to get the most out of people and help people to grow.
So taking your engineering experience, right, from my perspective, having that technical aptitude, that understanding of manufacturing processes allows you to come in on the manufacturing side and really kind of assess kind of what's going on in the operation. That also means you have to be engaging. You have to be engaged with your supervisors. You've got to be engaged with your technicians. You have to listen. Sometimes your best solution to a problem is that person on the floor. And those are things as we get new engineers. You engage the technicians, engage the people, because they are going to be ultimately part of that overall solution that you come up with. So now it really requires me to be more kind of global, assessing and watching the interactions, watching, we'll say, how people interact, watching behaviors, and then really I've kind of now turned into more of coaching. Right. So still very much engaged in the operation, but now watching the dynamics of the teams, right? Because you have people that have been there for 20, 30 years. You have people that have been there for 5 years, right? So the different in the dynamics of the people, you literally really, you've got to watch that, right? Because it's, how do you keep everybody engaged? How do you coach people, right? We're all human. That's the bottom line, right? People do things. Sometimes they don't mean to do things. And, part of the biggest thing I think in challenge for anybody is when you make a mistake, you make a mistake.
Yeah, got to own up to that.
Right? Leaders today didn't get to where they are because they did everything perfect, right? Right? I am not running optical operations because I did everything perfect, right? But you take that learning, you apply, you try to coach people, you try to really grow that organization, right? And this is what we're up against. 2017, running optical operations, we were 63 people. And ASML had an accelerated build plan. It was like looking at it and it's like, okay, we've got a real challenge ahead of us. And at that point, we had a gap in the hiring. We had a significant, we probably had a shortfall of 125, 150 people. That's what we were looking for.
What kind of people are we talking about?
We're talking about optical technicians. And on top of that, there were engineering positions. But inside just the optical operations, I was faced with the challenge of how are we going to recruit all these
people? And when you're recruiting for an optical technician, what does a typical resume look like? What are you looking for?
So that's a good question. When we were challenged with this growth, and something we've really probably been doing for about the last 6 or 7 years, is we've really been partnering with the local community colleges, Naugatuck Valley Community College, Housatonic Community College. They had the start of some of their advanced manufacturing technology programs where they're teaching the fundamentals of machining. When you're looking at the workforce and you've got such a huge gap now, it's how do you close that gap, right? So you're faced with a lot of challenges and a lot of hurdles, right?
Right.
You've got to bring 125 people on. You've got to, how do I shrink the training curve down? Where do you find the skill sets? So by partnering with them, that actually helped us quite a bit with some of the processes that we use inside of optical fabrication. When you're actually,
But are these 4-year? I mean, are these 4-year degree people you're looking for?
no, some of these were their 10-month programs, right?
Sure.
Where if they can master the fundamentals, then we can build upon the fundamentals.
Gotcha.
So when you're challenged with such a, we'll say, a gap in hiring, right? October 2017, we were 66 people. By June of 2018, we were 160 people. So in about a 9-month period, within ASML, we had brought on 100 new hires in optical fabrication. That's a challenge in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But then how do you make sure you have the right people, the right dynamics, right? So now it really gets into, as you're looking at resumes, as you're partnering with the local community colleges, what do you look for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's nobody's ever going to find the ideal candidate, right? So now it really boils down to, how do you change what you're looking for? So we took a different approach. We looked for attitude, we looked for aptitude, and then basically trained for skills. That is the approach we took, and that's really what allowed us to close some of the gap on our hiring, and fairly quickly, because now—
And was it successful?
Yes, it was. It actually was. We're now basically staffed across 3 shifts. When we were first shift, part of second, but every work center now is literally just about fully staffed. Going into next year, ASML is continuing to grow. Wilton's going to continue to hire into next year. The optical fabrication is going to continue to hire. Our module build and test, they're going to continue to hire. So we still have continued growth inside ASML Wilton.
And have you found that the local community colleges from the technical schools have been helpful in trying to fill the gaps and responsive to your needs?
Yes, and that's where we've really partnered very strongly with Naugatuck Valley Community College.
Mm-hmm.
Joe DeFeo up there, as we were expanding the building multiple times, he had come down. We had really built upon that program because bringing them down, they understand what we were up against, which allows them to really look at the candidates that they have inside the program and really kind of help us get to where we needed to be. So I can honestly say the partnership that we've had with NVCC has been great. Actually, for 2021, one of the things ASML has actually started is there's 2 scholarships that ASML has actually set up for women in manufacturing. So it's really to continue to engage our communities here, encourage women in manufacturing to pursue careers in manufacturing. A lot of people think manufacturing, and they think of the 1970s and the 1980s, and within ASML Wilton, it is state-of-the-art manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a machine shop environment. It is very much state-of-the-art. If you were actually to come through there and even look at, between our clean rooms, our fabrication groups, our coding, our metrology, it's all state-of-the-art manufacturing.
Is the workforce, just to take one step back, you had mentioned kind of focusing on women in manufacturing. In general, is the workforce that you're seeing that been recruited into ASML and what's out there, is it pretty diverse generally across gender, across race, across socioeconomic backgrounds?
Yeah, we don't discriminate in our hiring process, right?
Sure,
we
yeah.
leave all doors open. I mean, when you look, we have people that come from New York, New Jersey. We have people that come from Waterbury, Danbury, Hamden. We've even had some people travel from Groton.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we really reach out across the state.
And as you mentioned the NVCC partnership, have you found any other partnerships that have been helping? There's other people out there that are having workforce challenges too. And so who else have you, besides NVCC, which I don't want to minimize that. We all need to be.
And we also partner with Housatonic Community College.
Yep.
These 2 colleges, these 2 community colleges actually, they have these programs. They're teaching these fundamental skills, right? To machine a part, you've got to know how to measure it. To know how to measure it, you've actually got to know how to use the measurement equipment.
Tools. Yeah, sure.
So as we're trying to hire and ramp, having those basic fundamental skill sets, well, yeah, I know how to use a height gauge. I know how to use a set of dial calipers. Then it's a matter of teaching them the processes and understanding what they're measuring. So,
Yeah, no doubt about that. What's it, thinking about going to work for ASML, what is it like working there? What's a day in the life there? If someone's listening and they're like, wow, that sounds interesting. We've got all these great jobs happening. Maybe I want to get involved. What would you, if someone came to you and just said, or I am coming to you and saying, John, what's it like to work at ASML?
what's it like to work at ASML? Every day is challenging, right? You're challenged with production problems. You're challenged with new product introduction. But it's those challenges that when you look at it, you're pushing leading edge technology. We're pushing processes that if I look back 4 or 5 years ago, you'd be like, we didn't think we could do it, right? I remember a situation, we had multiple new programs coming on, and we were developing the processes, and they're actually in some of our leading edge EUV machines that we produce today, that there was additional. We want you guys to do this. And, it's human nature. It's my plate's full. We can't take on any more. And it's an interesting situation because we got directed that we were going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, okay, so we
got to make it happen.
Exactly. And we dug our heels in. We developed the manufacturing processes. We have streamlined those processes. We've reduced the cycle time. And when you look back and at one point we didn't want to tackle, but look how far we've come. Sometimes you have to continue to push yourself, just like we're pushing technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, ASML's EUV tools, they're on the leading edge of 7 nanometer, 5 nanometer, and pushing even 3 nanometer processes with our customers, right?
Tiny.
I kind of put in a spatial relationship when I started, it was a 350 nanometer line. So that would be like looking at a piece of paper straight on. Inside that, now take that paper, turn it sideways, right? And the same amount of electrical circuits inside that same volume. That's what you've got. It's amazing how far the technology's come. And we employ, even in all of our processes, for producing and building and testing and qualifying module assemblies, as well as manufacturing optical glass ceramic structures. We're employing state-of-the-art technology. So even though we're producing the machines, but we're also, we're using state-of-the-art 5-axis machines. And it's part of that whole evolution of driving this technology
to the next level. That's great. I mean, listen, that is super cutting edge. What's the culture like? How would you describe the culture at ASML Wilton?
The culture in ASML Wilton is a dynamic culture. Mm-hmm. It's a culture that really, when you look across it, it's a culture that is started with lean, our what we'll call our module build and test. If you go back in the history of ASML, right? Back in 1974, it was PerkinElmer, got acquired by SVG. We got acquired by ASML in 2001. But the what we'll call the module build group, they were really the pioneers for starting and driving lean as a culture through all of ASML. At that point in concepts, we had done a lot of work with them, but we have basically embedded that as kind of a culture and a philosophy. When I took over optical fabrication, it wasn't as embedded. And so now you're having to say, how are we going to apply lean? So sometimes you've got to step back. You have to deal with the culture. You got to deal with the change aspect of it. But when we actually started our journey down the lean path, we pulled every aspect of the organization in. We had logistics, we had procurement, we had HR, we had engineering, we had the supervision, we had management. Because when we first started down that lean journey, we left a couple groups out, right? Which was like, human nature is, well, we don't need them to be part of it. Well, when we started down the journey, we're like, well, that's a problem. So, but when you pull the whole team together, you ultimately get to the best solution, right?
Why is lean so important?
Lean is important in everything. If in ASML, it's important, but even in any business, they should always be thinking about lean, streamlining processes. In optical fabrication, we started lean. When we did our first value stream map, we mapped an optical component that traveled 6.5 miles in a building.
Oh.
Yeah, right? We had spherical optics that were traveling 2.5 miles in a building. And all of a sudden you start to say,
there's got to be a better way.
So you start with the value stream map, you pull the team in, the technicians who are very knowledgeable of the processes. No, we don't do that, we do this. That's not what the work instruction says. But then now you pull the engineers in. So really it was a good realignment that really got us to what our current and future state is today.
Do you feel like going through the lean journey not only helped streamline processes and reduce waste, but brought the team closer together?
Yes, right. And there are people that, to get everybody to believe in something is very difficult. It is. I mean, lean is a philosophy change, right? It's that kind of like, you're going to have 1/3, yep. You're going to have 1/3 to say, yep. And you're going to have 1/3, well, why do we got to do it? Right. So one of the questions, when people say, well, why do we got to do it? I always ask, well, why wouldn't we do it? Right. Why wouldn't we do it?
Right. Why not?
Right?
Yeah.
We're going to learn. Maybe we fail along the way. We'll step back and we'll figure out how we're going to adjust. But probably the outcome is going to be is we're going to be better today than we were a day ago, 2 days ago. And when I look through Wilton's optical fabrication lean journey, we've come a long way. And you have to keep that in perspective, but you also have to say, okay, now we're moving forward. How can we even apply it even more to the new technologies? Because when you're developing new technologies, you try to develop them in a lean manner, but some of the challenges may say, well, okay, it's a little bit inefficient. So you're driving technology, right, to get the new design, built, constructed to market. And then you step back and you're like, okay, now how do we lean those processes out?
Yeah,
and that is just a philosophy through all of ASML is it's constantly looking at lean, looking at our cycle times. How can we make things better?
So how do you go about, you're talking about the philosophy change. A lot of manufacturers, right, face that challenge of saying, hey, we want to change the way we do things and it's got to change the way people approach it. It's got to change the way people think. What have you done or what have you seen that's successful to help drive that change in the organization?
What I've seen is really the engagement. You have to engage the people. You have to communicate what's going on. When we started this, I mean, we had literally weekly meetings, right, with the teams. Here's what's going on, constant feedback. And even when you get to the end, you're like, do we think we're ready? Well, no, but at some point you got to say, okay, you know what, we're gonna do this, and then we'll make adjustments as we go, and we've had to.
So just to go back, you're like, so you have the communication, you decide you're getting into lean, and then you're doing regular communications like organization wide by functional area, both
within the organization. So when we started our lean journey with the value stream maps, right?
Sure.
We had everybody, and they were all part of that. I mean, it was literally a 6.
So you're like company wide meetings weekly to get on this
because we were coming on kind of the back end of it, because when you look at the module side, they had already been doing it since 2004. We started this in 2013. Right. So, we've been doing this 6 or 7 years. So the focus was really on the fabrication, right? Is how do we do things differently? We've basically taken a swim lane approach in a lot of our work centers, right? We've grouped operations where operations were done in this work center to where now they're in the swim lane, right?
Was all this worth the investment of time and energy?
Yes, it was, because, we were challenged by ASML. They made an investment. It had a return on investment on it. And we actually had the ROI in probably a year and a half.
That's, right. I think that's just so powerful, right? Like anyone who's not doing it or is thinking about doubling down, the ROIs, it's usually very, very short.
It is. And even as we're looking at this, we planned for X amount of scrap reduction, and we actually got probably 4 or 5X of that, right? Wow. So when you look at, we'll call it WIP, right? WIP is very important to any business, right? What do I have in WIP? How fast are my inventories going, right? Because it really ties up the company's money.
No doubt.
One point we were probably $800,000-$900,000 in WIP, and the optics we produce, they're not cookie cutter optics. They're not cheap. I mean, the components we have, they can range anywhere from $20,000 to $250,000. That is the quality and the level of optics that we produce that's required to support this technology.
Right.
But we went from there and we took it down to about $250,000.
Solid.
Right? And it's exciting to see it.
No.
And culture-wise, the CEO of the company would always come in and tour the manufacturing, and we'd show them what we're doing, and you'd get congratulations, hey, you guys are doing good. Right?
Source of pride for the team, I'm sure.
It is. It really is. And that's the key, is keeping the team energized, keeping the team even excited through the challenges, because, challenges can sometimes be like, you sit there. And even for myself personally, sometimes it's tough, but I always keep going back and like, okay, I got to be the positive one here to keep things moving, keep everybody energized, keep everybody in what I call the learning mode. Got
to do it. I like it. Listen, I mean, it's glass half full, glass half empty.
Correct.
It's really more about how you approach it than what the actual problem is. Being in such a high tech business, we've sort of talked about spending some time and energy investing in lean process, but when you're looking at making investments in the business, and there's different types of investments, right? There's technology, there's people, there's process, there's culture. When you think about how to continue to invest, especially in an industry that I imagine the pressure to innovate must be so high, how do you and the leadership team sit down and decide where to invest?
So in ASML, the company is very engaged with our customers. They have a very trusting relationship with the customers. We listen to our customers. We can design a piece of machinery, right? We can design a machine, and the customer has a problem. Well, it's not the customer's problem, it's all of our problems. And we help to solution those problems, right? So by staying engaged with the customer, understanding their technology roadmaps, then that usually comes down through our design and engineering and saying, hey, here's the next generation machine. And then that really starts to trickle down into the engineering teams, the manufacturing teams. Hey, this is coming down. And then we really start to look at, okay, how is this going to get incorporated into the process? What do we need? Do we have tooling? Can we do it with the existing machines, right? One thing that we're always doing is we've went through our whole lean process. And when we really, between our spherical work center and our planar work center, when we laid those centers out, we not only did it for where we were today, but we looked, where do we think we're going to be in 5 years? So one of the things is when you go down this lean journey, we did a major factory realignment in those two work centers.
Totally. But when you're growing at the pace you guys are growing at 5 years feels like, an eternity down the road to even try and plan for that.
It does, but knowing your equipment, knowing the size of your equipment, challenge with any company, right, is, I need a bigger piece of machinery. Okay. Then it's like, well, my aisle space is only 4 feet wide. Then you've got to take out walls. So as we went down our lean journey, we looked at this and we're like, okay, no, let's make this aisle weigh 8 foot. Then it allows us, knowing that
flexibility.
It's interesting is the lines are getting smaller and smaller, the machines are getting bigger
and bigger.
Right?
It is kind of funny, actually.
It is, but
it takes a bigger machine to make a smaller part.
So
yeah. So I mean, just kind of pulling on that even a little bit further. So one thing you said, you talked about the customer, and I just wonder about this, which is, listening to the customer, certainly never a bad thing to do. But there's always challenges with the customer that sometimes they don't either know what they want or what they really need next, or sometimes they love to ask for stuff that they may not actually be willing to buy. How do you kind of separate the wheat from the chaff? I think I'm going to maybe misquote this, but wasn't it like Henry Ford that said, if I'd listened to the customer, I would have tried to invent a faster horse? I mean, it's like, how do you kind of thread that needle?
For ASML Wilton, we basically stay aligned with the corporate business and the directives that they actually set forth for us. They are very much aligned to the customer.
Right.
There is a lot of interaction with them. And based on that interaction, new designs
Information
coming
comes through.
down,
Sure.
this is how we look to transition. This is how we're going to plan to address it. It's a very collaborative, interactive discussion with all the groups, the engineering groups, the design engineering groups, the manufacturing groups. When they start, talking about ideas, it's like, okay, well, what's it going to take to build and test this module, right? As you'll see, if you drive down past ASML Wilton, they have a big addition going on for next generation EUV tool, which is we call EX5000. Okay, it's huge, right? So yes, the machines are getting bigger, the chips are getting smaller, but in preparation for the development of that, ASML Wilton being part of that is already planning for that. We're already constructing the facility for that.
Planning ahead, not building the facility for the machine you haven't even sold yet.
Yeah.
Critically important.
Yes, very much so.
Always trying to be that next, being that next step ahead. And this is where the customer communication comes from, making sure you know where your customer is trying to go so that you can predict where they're going to be and try and get there to support them.
And ASML is very engaged with their customers. That is the key, right? Right. And it's back and forth. If your customer comes to you with a problem and says, I've got this problem, can you solution it? Right. And ASML will be like, let us take a look at it. And we do. I mean, if they have certain process problems, they will come back and we will dig our heels in and we will look, okay, well, we think we can do this, this, this. We may make a prototype module for the customer to help validate what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I know that's the key though, right? Understanding your customer's problems, walking a mile in their shoes, which puts you in the opportunity to say, problem identified, problem solved, value added, right?
Yes, kind of like when I took over optical fabrication. It's a very difficult process. When I was on the module side building projection lenses, I was the customer receiving their glass, right? And it would be like, well, why can't you deliver on time, right? So, taking over fabrication and knowing what that was like for me, I kind of made it part of the mission to how do we go and we change that so that we're not making, our internal customer wait. And with that, we were able to do that, but now we're also up against new technologies, right? The new technologies, the new optical design specifications are tighter, which now creates additional challenges. And so those are some of the
additional challenges, additional opportunities to invent something new, solve a problem, have some fun doing it.
Okay.
You said something to me on the phone, which I wanted to just bring up when we were kind of prepping for this, which was like, you sent me something like the 3 C's: challenge, collaboration, and caring. And I just wonder if you could talk about that phrase. You just sort of mentioned it to me offhandedly, but I wrote it down and I just wonder what that phrase means to you and how you apply that at work.
So that phrase that we actually talked about is part of what we'll say the how. When you're at work, everybody's focused on the what, right? Oh, I've got to get this done. But also inside that what is the how. And part of the culture and change that we are driving, and actually it's globally across ASML, is the 3 C's. It's what we call basically the challenge. Challenge what we do is right, and then collaborate to solve the challenge, which ultimately care and care about what you're doing, care about the people. So going into 2021 for ASML, it is the 3 C's. We will begin to roll that out. And to me, I've kind of got a little bit of a start on it because I spent a lot of time thinking about it across the organization, across the behaviors, and it's like, how am I going to do this? Give you an example, right? We're a 3-shift operation. COVID has really really kind of, it hasn't impacted the business, but it's affected the way we work, right? We as humans are very interactive. We like to talk. We like to socialize, right? That's how, one, it's good. It's how we learn. It's how we interact. But when this COVID started, ASML, we had to take some very different approaches, right? So one of the things when this started in March of this year, what we actually did is we actually implemented shift isolation. So now, you don't have first shift interacting with second shift doing a handoff, but ASML looked at it as it's important to protect the people. If we can protect the people, protect their families, then ultimately it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, well, that's part of that caring, right?
It is, and that's part of the caring. I mean, we've done so much. ASML in Wilton, we have thermal scanners at every entrance, and literally you come in every morning and you go through a thermal imaging scanner, right, to make sure that if somebody, maybe you get sick and you kind of feel okay, well, I'm going to go to work, and all of a sudden you're 99.6. Well, guess what? You don't get in the building.
Right.
And it's not only to protect you, but it's to protect your fellow colleagues, right?
Hey, listen, that's we got to care about each other, right? If we're going to, especially in a pandemic, if we're going to get through it. So it's really kind of starting to wrap. I did want to just ask you a couple of things, which is, when you think about what you do at ASML and like what you do every day, what do you love best about your job?
What I love best about my job is the technology challenges as we're driving innovation. And also from the cultural people side is growing the organization, trying to keep the team dynamics going, really, keeping people engaged. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. It's a challenge for all of us. But really trying to stay positive in light of the COVID. It's challenging because people like to engage one another. So one of the things I do is I actually cross all three shifts. I'm the only one in the fabrication organization that actually does that. And part of it is to keep engaged with the people, right clear down to the technician level. I will come in. I'll ask them how things are going. I'll ask them how their families are. Is everybody's family okay? Because you know what? If your family's not healthy or if you got issues there, then, maybe there's something we can do to help you out, but you got to stay that engaging. And we do that across the shifts, right?
And that's what you enjoy the most is kind of being that guy.
Yes. Kind of being that guy and really showing them that, sometimes I don't see everybody, but in the bottom line, I actually care. I care about the people. I care about the business. ASML is a great company to work for. 25 years, it's been exciting. It's been dynamic. It's been challenging, and looking forward to working and driving next generation technology.
Why is it so important, you think, as a leader in general? And if you want to get specific, that's fine. But why is it so important to be positive, do you think?
I'm going to kind of give you my personal view.
Please.
So this is not even a company view. We look around. We look around every day, right? Anybody can find any negative about any situation, right? Sometimes maybe you don't feel good. Maybe you're having a bad day. Maybe you don't like the politics. I don't know, honestly. But I think people need to look at the positive of everything. That's where the energy comes from, right? Negative energy, positive energy. When you're negative, right, you'd be surprised. One or two people could be negative, and they could pull 4 or 5 people down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when you see that, you got to go into those coaching moments, and you got to try to keep people positive. And keeping people positive is really just showing that you care, that you listen, right? Sometimes you can't always get the suggestions that they want to do, right? But at least circle back, say, hey, I haven't gotten to it, just to give them that feedback, right? But in today, people need to be more positive. I mean, we're facing a pandemic here that honestly, it has got everybody, we're kind of adjusted, but now we're in the second upswing. When you look at it, it's just like, oh, here we go again, right?
It's that level of uncertainty, right? Gives people pause. And I think you're right. You said something there, though, I think that's really important, which was you got to show them you care. You got to listen. But you also, you didn't say it directly, but you referenced it. And I think it's quite poignant, which is you have to act.
Yeah.
So it's going to show that you care. It's listening to it's, and listening and hearing them, then you prove it by taking action. And I think that's such an important part of leadership, John. And I'm sure it's a part of why you've been so successful in Wilton, because people do know you care and you're out there listening and then taking action behind it, which has got to be so important.
And one of the things I'll actually add there, we talk about care, we talk about ASML Wilton. The management ASML Wilton cares so much. Every day, we have a 9 o'clock COVID meeting. And we have had that since this started in March, and it continues. And we're constantly assessing. We are looking, do we have enough gloves? Do we have enough safety masks? We're listening. Are people bringing up issues that we need to discuss? So that as a whole, we are listening to them to make sure that we're doing the right things, right? Because if we don't listen, it's going to be that one time that, we didn't listen. And then it could turn into a situation that maybe we could have prevented it. So, from the Asml Wilton management standpoint, very good team that, I mean, every day I sit in the 9 o'clock COVID discussion meeting, right? We review things, and it's a group. It's the whole facilities. I mean, it's the management, it's the supervision. Hey, what's going on? What happens if you have a breakout? What's the response? What's your strategy? So ASML has all that in place. They have that in place worldwide. We have that in place at the ASML Wilton facility.
And listen, that's just totally in alignment, right? Challenge the assumptions, challenge where we are, collaborate, working together, and then caring, taking that action to show people you guys care. And clearly that's what you've been doing and investing in keeping people safe, which has kept the facility open and kept people safe, which is the name of the game, right?
Yes.
Well, listen, it's been great talking to you, John. I'm going to move to rapid fire round of questions. Are you ready? You ready to go?
Okay.
All right, here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Neither.
Uh-oh. Well, which one? What are you going to pick? Neither, just no baseball?
I'm not a Red Sox or Yankee fan.
All right. Do you have a team?
Huh?
Do you have a team?
Okay, so if I'm originally from Pennsylvania and I went to Penn State.
Pirates?
Pirates, Pittsburgh, Steelers, Penguins.
There you go. Starbucks, by the way, just as a quick side note, back when the old Three Rivers days, I went on a baseball park tour. I went up through Canada, back around.
Yep.
And I went to Three Rivers. They were having a referendum on supporting the building of the new stadium. So my entire family was with me. We all voted for that new stadium. So there you go. You're welcome.
Both the baseball and the football?
That's it. Yeah, we said separate them and new ones. Yeah, which I believe they both did, right?
They did separate them, and I've actually managed to be in both of them.
Oh, there you go. Well, I played some small part in that, so I feel good about it. Starbucks or Dunkin'?
I could do both. Either or.
No preference. When you take time off, no COVID, but just regularly, you a staycation guy or more of exotic destination?
I'm not an exotic destination, but I'm not a staycation either.
So just somewhere in between. We're going somewhere, but it's not super exotic?
Doesn't have to be.
All right, fair enough. iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Both.
Both? Do you have a favorite business book?
No.
Okay.
I stay open to the books that are out there.
Books that are out there.
Because I think no matter what you do, you can always pick up something when you're reading those books. Got
to keep on learning. If you could do anything and had to, other than your current role as a senior manager of optical operations in Wilton, what would you do?
Wow, I feel like I'm on an interview.
You are actually.
I know. This would be one of the questions that I would actually ask on an interview.
No, there you go. Well, and if anyone's looking for a job at ASML, they know what to get ready for.
I don't think I would change anything. My career up to this point has really been fulfilling. It's been challenging, sometimes frustrating.
Sure.
But looking back, looking at where I started and where I am today, no regrets.
Keep it the same. If there's something, what's one thing, John, that you learned early in your career that you think's helped springboard you to the success that you've had?
Wow. Oh boy. I'm going to give you this little example. So as a young engineer, right, and any engineer, right, they're really kind of gun-ho, right? They really want to try to prove themselves. And I remember in a situation when I was working for a company and we were working on the process, because when I had come on board, the process yields were about 30%, right? So we had a big uphill challenge. And I remember getting into an argument right out in a public forum, right? And young, I'll call it young, inexperienced, you don't know, right? I ended up, probably after that, I ended up in the plant manager's office with the door closed.
I bet.
And it was a coaching moment for me. It was a learning moment. And, because as a young engineer, I was so focused trying to get that process improved. And to really, by the time we got done getting that process fixed, within about a year, we had the yields back up to like 95%. So it was really good for the company. But the coaching moment was that when you think you're going to have discussions like that, you really take it behind closed doors. You don't bring it out into a kind of, we'll call it the public forum, right? Because then all of a sudden you got other people watching, and then, the rumors start. So that was one of the biggest things that I've learned as a young engineer in my career. And it really was a learning experience for me. The other thing too, when I was a young designer and I was designing tooling, right? Put a lot of time and effort into it. And so took it down to the machine shop to have them make the tool. And, I really thought I dotted my I's and crossed the T's. And, now you're talking, you got these guys that have been machinists 25, 30 years, and they're sitting there and they're like, this isn't going to work. Nope. And I'm like, well, yes, it is. And, you're young, you're just strong-headed. It's exactly what it was, strong-headed. They're like, okay. So, of course, went ahead, made the tool, went to test the tool, didn't work. Shocker.
So what was your takeaway?
So my takeaway, similar to what I've been saying, is you need to engage everybody, whatever you're doing, whether you're doing engineering, you're doing manufacturing, engage the technicians, right? You can have an engineer working with a technician saying, hey, this is a great tool design, but make sure
sometimes the guys with the practical knowledge know a little bit more. So what's one thing, John, that you learned later in your career that if you went back and told young John and he'd listen to you, that you think would really be helpful for him?
What I would tell young John, especially now, I've been in manufacturing for over 25 years, to be open, really to be open, to be engaging, always be willing to change, right? Change is tough, and through my career and just looking at organizations, right? And it doesn't matter. I see people that work at other companies and, they're doing this. And I'm like, okay. And you're giving your opinion? Are you helping to solution a problem? Are you identifying things? So it becomes a win-win and a learn for everybody. That would be it, is really just continue to stay open-minded, because, young engineer, right? You're full steam ahead with, I hate to say it, blinders on, right?
Yeah, I feel you.
So, and it's human nature, right? Yeah. You know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
And understanding what you don't know, never be afraid to say, hey, I don't know. Can somebody help me out? Is there a direction where I can actually go and get some insight?
No doubt. Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, it's really great, John. It has been a pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much for your time and coming on and sharing your views.
It's been great to be here, Ari.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thank you so much for tuning in and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a community where we can learn and grow together. Your input, feedback, and engagement is critical to making that happen. Please do comment, like, and subscribe so more and more people can hear what we're doing and join our community of growth and success. Thanks so much for tuning in. Talk to you again soon.